Hola, this is Enrique Morones with Gente Unida and Magnificent Mujer. And we, Gente Unida, with Sarah Bella, our producer, and yours truly, Enrique Morones, are glad to bring you another wonderful, wonderful, and very magnificent Mujer. Somebody that if you don't know, you should know. She's a dear friend. She's been very active with Gente Unida, working with dreamers, working with students for over 10 years in education. And her name is Yadi Ortiz. Yadi, bienvenida a Magnificent Mujer. How are you?
Thank you, Enrique. Thank you. I'm doing well, as best as we could, as best as, we all can right now with everything that's going on, probably locally, nationally, worldwide. There's so many things going on. So I think we're all trying as much as we can to stay afloat and stay positive and stay healthy.
Yes. And your name, Yadira. Yadira, that's a beautiful name. Where does the name come from?
Well, it's an interesting story, actually. My mom and my dad had a very big fight about my name. My dad wanted to call me Andrea. My mom wanted to call me actually Shakira when I was born. And my dad was like, no, que es eso, right? And so my grandmother actually came up with the name. And as far as they've told me, I don't know if it's true, they took it from the Bible. And it's the female version of Yahir.
Oh,
and so
very nice.
that's what I've been told.
Uh-huh.
And so yeah,
Well,
so that's where it comes from.
It's a beautiful name. And is it true that you came up with the saying yadi yadi ya? Is that one of your sayings? Did you come up with that?
No, but it's not the first time I hear it. Growing up, teachers, even students yodeled to my name. That was very, very common. And so, yes, I'm kind of used to it by now.
Oh, good. And as you may have heard on Magnificent Mujer or Buen Hombre, we had an incredible Buen Hombre not too long ago named Juan Rosas. I don't know if you know the guy, but it was probably the best episode we've ever had for Buen Hombre. At the very beginning, I'd like the person to kind of introduce themselves. So Yadi, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your family and who is Yadi Ortiz?
Yeah, so first of all, I am a mom. I am a mom of three very strong-headed children. They're 8. They all turned birthdays recently. So it's 8, 13, and now 16 years old. So wow. I have one child at every level of education, elementary, middle school, and high school. So it's been interesting, and all the different challenges that comes with being a mom and being a professional. But I try to put being a mom first, even though that's sometimes, it's a very challenging when you're a mom and a professional and a humanitarian, and you have to juggle all of that. But yeah, first of all, I am a mother of 3 kids. And so, yeah, and then I have my wonderful husband, Juan Rosas, who you have interviewed in the past. And so, yeah, that is my family. And aside from that, I mean, I'm a working person. I'm a working professional, working with undocumented students for a very long time. And so that's a little recap of who I am and where I'm at right now.
And you have 3 wonderful children. I love your children, and I've gotten to know them a little bit, and it's always fun to interact with them, whether it's throwing the Frisbee or kidding around about baseball or various activities that we've done. It's a wonderful family. And Yadi, so you're very active with education, with the Pre-Health Dreamers. Tell us a little bit about how you got into education to begin with.
Yeah, so for me, my degree is actually in communication, right? So I grew up wanting to be a reporter. I actually wanted to be a journalist, and I wanted to do news and report on stories about people and just the injustices that exist all around the world, right? So that's what I went to school for. And then once I graduated, I was very fortunate to be hired in at a Cal State, at an institution of higher education. The Cal State system is actually the largest system in the state of California with 23 campuses. So I was fortunate enough to just, be hired and be offered a job there. And through that job, it was actually through the admissions office. And when I got hired, not very, short after, I was asked to actually be a resident specialist. So if, the individuals that don't know what a resident specialist is a person that actually evaluates a student's immigration status, and based on that and how long they've been living in California, we would actually charge the student either in-state or out-of-state tuition, right? Well, in the state of California, there's something called AB 540, which came into place in 2001, which allows undocumented students and also US citizens to pay in-state tuition if they are not residents of California, right? But they had to have done high school at that time. Now the bill has been modified and it's expanded to cover more individuals, but back then it was you had to have had high school and graduated from high school. So I was the person that was evaluating those documents, right? And I knew about immigration. I knew about undocumented students. I knew about undocumented families, just coming from an immigrant family myself. But I did not know and did not realize the hardships that students and the families had to go through when they were undocumented to go into higher education. So back in 2006, this is when I learned about this. I learned, students being, kept from college because either counselors didn't know that undocumented students could go to school. Financial aid was extremely limited at that time because as of 2012, they, undocumented students now get financial aid in the state of California, but then they didn't. Right, so it was a lot of maybe private scholarships or fundraising. So I learned about all the different obstacles and hurdles that students, undocumented students and their families have to overcome just to go to college. And so from that, I actually worked to do a lot more research on what does this really mean and how can we help further. And throughout time, I was actually, given the green light at my campus. I had a wonderful advisor. I had a wonderful director later on through the Education Opportunity Program known as EOP. And they said, you know what, Yadi, we see what you're saying, and let's help you push all of these things through. And so through all of that work, we were able to create resources on that campus for undocumented students and their families and the community as a whole. We created ally networks, ally trainings, and actually helped in, we actually established an undocumented student program on that campus. It was the fourth one at the Cal State system, fourth or fifth one at the Cal State system out of the 23 that now exist.
Was that at Long Beach?
No, that was at Cal State San Bernardino.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So you were at both, right? You were at San Bernardino and at Long Beach?
Yeah, so Cal State San Bernardino, actually, that's my home. I grew up in the Inland Empire. I'm an Inland Empire girl. And so Cal State San Bernardino is where all of my educational and professional background, that's where I grew up, basically, both education in the educational world and the professional world. And so later on in 2017, that's when I went and tried Cal State Long Beach for a little while. I was there for like a year and a half. But now one of my big things was always wanting to go into nonprofit. I realized that I love helping and I love advocating. I'm a huge advocate for undocumented students and, all students that come from underserved communities. And so I really was hoping to go into the nonprofit sector so that I can use my voice in a very different way, advocate from a very different angle. In higher education, you really have to strategize and you really have to, it takes a little bit longer to do a lot of the advocacy that you want to do and see things happen. So I really wanted to challenge myself and challenge institutions from a different angle Ever since probably December, I think I've worked with 5 different schools that were denying students based on their immigration status. And now they've all changed their admissions policies for those programs, most of them being nursing.
And was AB 540, was that the bill that was advocated by Marco Antonio Fireball?
Yes, it was.
Marco Antonio Fireball was a dear friend of mine. And I'll never forget, rest in peace, and I never forget when he would be talking about that and how he and people like Gil Cedillo, they get behind something and they see it through, sacrificing, like in the case of Marco Antonio, their lives, or Gil Cedillo, his wife's life, where they're so dedicated to it. They'll make a promise to get it done, and then it gets done, and it's important that we remember who are the people behind that. So a shout out to Marco Antonio Fireball. He was a great man. And when you mentioned that some of the schools that you've been working with of late didn't have this program for undocumented students, was it because of ignorance, or were they just trying to not get financing for them, or what was going on?
Yeah, well, I think it spans from different knowledge, different ideas, let's call it that individuals have, right? Some folks or some professionals don't know that laws exist that prohibit schools and healing art programs such as nursing from discriminating students based on their immigration status. They're not aware of these laws. So one of the laws is SB 1139. That's the one that doesn't allow for schools, especially healing arts programs, to discriminate students based on immigration status. So professionals sometimes don't know this in institutions, right? You're constantly getting new staff, you're constantly getting new faculty. So a lot of it is not being aware of what's happening. And I do think that sometimes it's a bias, it's through my educational career or my professional career, I've heard individuals just say, we're impacted. So impacted means we have a lot more qualified applicants that we can bring into our schools, right? And so if we're impacted, we have to first, give all the opportunity to those that are born here. Why are we bringing in students that are not born in the US? Right, and so that, yeah, and so schools really go into that kind of survival mode of how do we bring in and how do we process all these applications? Right, so I think that's why laws like SB 1139 are so important, because they keep individuals from doing that. So now it's just taking that step further and continue to educate professionals in higher education and let them know that that's number one, against the law, and number two, it's just ethically immoral for them to be doing that. So I think it comes from so many different, I worked in admissions offices for a very long time, and admission staff and admission groups kind of do think that, like, how are we going to bring in all of these students, right? Or how do we choose which ones to bring in when you have triple, quadruple the amount of applicants that may be eligible? How do we narrow that down? And so a lot of schools are not holistic, right? A lot of schools don't bring in students or they don't see the different backgrounds that students have, right? So they don't take into account the linguistic or the cultural intelligence that some students have. They don't do all of that. They base it based on test scores. Sometimes GPA, and so they're not very many schools are very holistic in their admission process. And so that's a shame. I hope that now, with everything that we've seen with COVID-19, a lot of schools are taking away their admission exams, because there is, it becomes so difficult to include those. And so I'm hoping that there's some type of learning curve, or I hope there's some learning that we have in our higher education system when it comes to SAT scores, and, looking at more than just the GPA. Of course it takes a lot more work, because it's not black and white, but I hope COVID-19 brings a light to all of that.
Yeah, so much more than the GPA. And then, of course, those of us of color, maybe our parents, maybe it's a one-parent family. We have 2 or 3 jobs. We're taking care of our little brothers and sisters because there's nobody else home and the parents gone. We're doing our homework at 2 in the morning, taking the bus to school. I mean, all the challenges that people don't realize. So it's much more than the GPA. And I know that you were very involved in something called the Dream Success Center. That tell me about that. Tell me about the Dream Success Center. What is that? How does that work?
Yeah, so I actually helped establish the Dream Success Center at Cal State San Bernardino, which is now called the Undocumented Student Programs, or the Undocumented Student Success Center at Cal State San Bernardino. And so, back in 2006, let's go back again to 2006, at many campuses, it was still kind of scary for a lot of professionals and administrators to talk about undocumented students in such a broad, just to have those conversations and just say, okay, well, how do we help students? How do we help create programming for them? How to assist undocumented students, right? And so for a lot of individuals all across the state, and you still see it nationwide, right? It's still kind of a difficult conversation for folks to have. Number one, because they're not informed in the topic. And then number two, for many, it feels very political, right? Like, this is political. We start admitting undocumented students, or we start providing extra resources for undocumented students, it's going to make us seem one-sided, right? And so, not at Cal State San Bernardino, but I think just overall, I saw that. I saw that a lot of staff and administrators still had that mentality, right? Had it. And so there was a lot of education that had to take place, not just at Cal State San Bernardino, but nationwide and statewide, right, on why this is necessary. So again, at Cal State San Bernardino, I was very excited to have such a supportive director and allies that were really able to assist in the process. And we were actually able to start, at that time we called it the Dream Center. And that was by the student's choice. Yeah, that was by the student's choice that we named it that. And so we actually did a call, because I was meeting with students all the time, and they're like, is there a club? Is there an organization on campus? And there wasn't one in 2006 or 2007. And so I think I got very tired of hearing that and not being able to provide an answer for the students. And so again, later on, we did a call, and that first call that we made, we just said, hey, who wants to start a club for undocumented students? 75 students showed up. 75 undocumented students showed up to our meeting.
Wow.
And it was just amazing. And we had such a great group of students who are very passionate and very just, excited to make this happen. And through that, we actually created a student org. All women on the board. Those were the ones that were leading the way.
It should be.
Right. And then through that, we actually advocated for the Dream Center. And so through that Dream Center, we were able to provide, both admissions, guidance and that guidance to help students, the academic side or the advising side to help students while they're in college or while they're at the university. But we also extended the help out to the community, right? So we worked with a lot of community partners. We started creating legal clinics, health access, health information for undocumented families in regards to, health access. So there was a lot, and I think the most important thing was community building for the students. They were finally able to get to meet each other. And so the center is still there. There's an amazing team leading it. I still visit once in a while because I feel so attached to that team and to that family. And so, yeah, and I think now, right now, presently, most Cal States now have either an undocumented student program or a Dream Center, or at least somebody to go to, a go-to person that's very well informed and knowledgeable of the needs of undocumented students.
Well, congratulations. It is so important. And San Bernardino is very, brings back a lot of memories to me in 2006, because in 2006, that's when I, with Gente Unida and Border Angels, did something called Marcha Migrante, where on February 2nd of 2006, we left from Friendship Park, a place very special to you as well. And we left from Friendship Park all the way to Washington, D.C. in a caravan of what became 111 cars to ask people to take to the streets and march and protest for humane immigration reform. And one of our first stops was in San Bernardino, but it was at UCR. It was at where Armando Navarro is, at that Riverside or San Bernardino. Is he in San Bernardino or Riverside?
No, I think Dr. Armando Vasquez?
No, Navarro.
Navarro.
It might have been Riverside, but we went to San Bernardino and we did an action there. And we went to Riverside because we stopped in California in various locations. And I remember what we did up in that area was we placed crosses to remember the people that have died. And we've always had that tradition, or I've had that tradition like others, to put the crosses, no olvidados. So we did a ceremony, and we did a ceremony in San Bernardino. We did a ceremony in Riverside. We went to 4 or 5 cities in California, and then we started working our way east to Arizona, et cetera, to go across the country and ask people to take to the streets that spring and ask for humane immigration reform. And of course, that was the spring, which now I call the Immigrant Spring, taken after the name of the Arab Spring, which was way later, about people marching in the streets and asking for humane immigration policies. That was the spring of 2006 when 4.5 million people took to the streets and protested in support of humane immigration reform. And this year, we got to take to the streets and protest on November 3rd by going to the ballot box and voting, because we're going to have the biggest election ever in our lives. And talking about these programs through the Cal State system, I'm encouraged to know that now there's a new law or a proposal about ethnic studies being mandatory to be taught at the Cal State system. How does that work? I know it's brand new, but has that developed yet? How they're going to initiate it, what the process is? Do you know about that?
I heard about it and I read a little bit about it, Enrique, but I'm not too familiar with the background of it. I know that I believe Cal State Northridge. So Cal State Northridge students are very active and very involved in speaking out about ethnic studies and the way it's not being taught or the way it should be taught. And they've been very powerful and very vocal. And I think probably a year or 2 years ago was one of their largest advocacy efforts that they did during a faculty meeting. That's as much as I know. And I know a lot of times faculty has had a hard time getting resources or that financial, assistance to push these classes through, these courses through. So I'm not very familiar with the bill that's coming through, and if it's really, I hope it helps. I hope it helps in the way it's meant to help, and I hope that universities do push it through and really provide these courses, right? Because I mean, even in an elementary, I think that's where it should start. And I know it's probably a difficult, some folks may or may not agree with me, but I think even as children, they should start learning a lot of this content, not in college, not in university, but early on. So I really don't know if and how and when it's going to start being implemented. I know sometimes it takes it's not a super quick turnaround, and there's a lot of, changes that are going to have to be taken in the departments, that are going to have to teach this. So I don't know. I hope it works, and I hope it's a positive move, and that it really does what it's supposed to accomplish what it's supposed to accomplish.
I'm confident it'll take place. As this year we celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Chicana Moratorium, and the struggles that they went through. That was a generation before me that they went through to have Chicano studies, etc. So it happens. But you're right. I agree with you 100%. It should start in elementary school. When we're in elementary school, we should start seeing people that look like us. You know, women that look like us, men that look like us, and that are heroes, because that's going to help build who we are, you know, as we grow through life. And it's so very important. And you're doing a very, very important program. And I want to really learn more about this. Your Pre-Health Dreamers program. All of these dreamers that are studying, I believe, to get into the field of medicine. Tell me about it. How does that work? What's that all about?
Yeah, so Pre-Health Dreamers, I was so excited. I joined over a year ago as the executive director for the program, and I was just thrilled, and I'm so blessed to be part of this wonderful team who all believe in that same mission, right? And you know, advocating and pushing and opening doors for undocumented students, especially students that are going into these pre-health majors and programs, you know, in order to become doctors, physical therapists, dentists, you know, just so many other different careers that our students are pursuing. And so one of the big parts of it is advocacy, right? So as I had mentioned before, we worked already with 5 schools, 4 or 5 schools since December. You know, one of the things that we do is we advocate for more progressive and non-discriminatory admission practices at schools, right? And so that's one of the big things. But then the other challenge is also not just accepting the student, but make sure that they go through school, you know, with as much assistance as possible, right? And so that's, you know, the holistic advising, holistic counseling, but also the financial aspect. Financial aspect is a huge component on why a lot of our students don't pursue these degrees, right? And so it's really advocating and working with schools to try to help and provide all of the support that's necessary for the students, right? So it's a lot of educating, a lot of training. We're actually working on a project right now to do a lot more training with schools. Right, so it's that advocacy component of it. The other component of it is doing that. We have a peer engagement and enrichment program for undocumented students who are pursuing health degrees. And I think that is one of the most wonderful part of our job, that we get to meet students and build community with our students. So we have students who are in community college all the way to already applying for medical school, or applying for their professional programs, right? And so last year we had around 50 students in our program. This year we hope to do the same. And so it is really helping them through that process, teaching them advocacy, because I think that's a very important tool for them to learn as they continue, right? Because they're not going to just hit, you know, obstacles right now through the admissions process. They're also going to hit a lot of obstacles when they're going into their professional fields. You know, as professionals and undocumented professionals and professionals of color, you know, they're going to hit a lot of obstacles throughout their entire, you know, professional lives. So it's really training and working with them to, you know, gain those tools to be able to move forward. And then we also have, we have our advising, we have our advocacy there. And so, yeah, it's a really great program. We meet a lot of students. We do a lot of empowerment training with them. And one of the wonderful things that I've seen is, so there's this process called coming out of the shadows, right? And so that's kind of coming out as an undocumented person, kind of to yourself, to those around you. And it's really a powerful process for many students. It's a very difficult and scary one, of course. But one of the great things that I've seen is that once our students are empowered and learn the skills that they kind of need and learn how to advocate, it's very rare when I see them kind of retract, right? They just kind of keep pushing forward and doing a lot of advocacy and joining forces with other undocumented youth who are doing the same. And so we do a lot of that training with our students so that they can continue.
It's an amazing program. And my father had wanted to be a doctor. He was born in Mexico City. He passed away 7 years ago. But he said that the challenge for him was the studies of, the dedication that you have as a medical student. And so I really admire these students that are in this program that you're talking about, and the fact that, they sacrifice so much, not knowing if it's going to be taken away. I'd like to give a shout out to Juan in the background back there, by the way, trying to get some FaceTime in the mirror. I've never seen that type of FaceTime by doing it on the mirror. Usually it's like getting behind the person on the camera, but that's a good one.
I know, you should know better by now, but yeah.
I'm glad he didn't yell out some of the things he says that he likes to yell out when he's going down the stairs. I'm glad he didn't do that.
He didn't slide down today.
But yeah, so, and I know that we were working together on the possibility of, you were doing the retreat, and I had turned you on to a dear friend of mine, Paul Chavez, who's Cesar Chavez's second oldest son. Him and Monica, at the Chavez Center, and looking at doing a retreat there, something that in the future, I'm sure you're going to, still do retreats. That type of inspiration, getting to know somebody like, one of the Chavez members, like Paul Chavez, Cesar's second son, or my good friend, Yasser Giron, who's a medical doctor from Guatemala, who volunteered with me when I first founded Gente Unida, and we would join in protest, and him and his partner, Tatiana, they're both medical doctors at UCI, Go Anteaters. And then they have this program called Prime. And every year they come down to San Diego, and I would talk to them. And what was really interesting about these pre-med students was I would ask, most of them would be of color, but not all. But I would ask the ones of color, especially Latinos, why did you decide to get into this field? Why did you decide to be a doctor? And in their case, the majority would say something like, when I was little, I saw the doctor come and save my grandmother's life, or I used to translate for the doctor when we go see the doctor, things like that. And then when it was the Anglo community, not always, because they sometimes had that story, but in their case, it was different. A lot of times they would say, well, my dad's a doctor, and my grandfather's a doctor, and my great-grandfather. So it's kind of in their history. But what the one thing that was in common with this Prime program was all about, as for them to give back. Now that they're going to become doctors, not to forget these communities, to go back into these communities that need the doctors the most. And that's what you're doing with this program is so important, because they're meeting other people like themselves. They're meeting people that are like themselves that have already made it. And they're meeting inspirational people, like we were talking about at the beginning. You see those inspirational people when you're in grammar school by reading about them in a book, that says, I can make it. Look at this person. I didn't realize so-and-so was a Latina or a Latino. We got to hear those stories. And in this case, the program you have, they get to meet these people. Do you have these students in your program? Do you have them now go out into the field and do some of their work to get to know, like your husband and you both are involved with our program for the day laborers? Do you have them go out and do things like that, where they go out into the field and maybe put the practice? I know they can't do everything. They're not doctors yet, but they can do some stuff.
So this year, we're actually incorporating that into our peer mentor program, into our peer engagement enrichment program, for them to actually reach out to the younger students, Right now, we're working on a high school project. We're working on a high school project, a community college project, a post-baccalaureate project, and a project with professionals as well. And so right now, we are hoping that this year we can connect our current participants of our peer mentor program with the younger students, with the high school students, right? To even move them forward. And a lot of our alumni, so a lot of our mentors that have graduated from our program are actually now, around 200 of them are now either in the ending of their professional program or already practicing professionals. So we're constantly connecting them to our current cohort of students for them to kind of see that experience. And one of the big things is, we're looking to have a shortage of physicians in the near future.
And I was going to say, because you mentioned something that's very important and something that you've been active in. the mentorship. You, when you've acted as a mentor, how important is that to them?
Oh, yeah.
Having somebody that they can talk to, like you, for example, having them talk to you and you can tell them, I've gone through this, I understand, I know what you're talking about. That is so critical to their development.
Yeah, one of the most difficult things for our students, and this is why so education and higher education is such a challenge. Mentally, there's a mental health component to it, right? One of the big challenges is having to explain again and again what undocumented means, what being a DACA recipient means, what being a TPS, recipient means. So having to explain all of this, where, how, and then sometimes their students from professionals in education get very uncomfortable questions, thrown at them. And so this is a very, admissions process for undocumented individuals is a very draining process sometimes. So yes, it feels, I think it does take a little bit of that weight off when undocumented individuals and students are able to connect with somebody that they don't have to explain themselves to.
Right.
Right. And you just know and you understand and you get it. Now let's move forward and advocate and grow stronger and empower and get that empowerment.
Yes, very important. And we started off talking about remembering people that have gone before us, that we can't forget their legacy. Not only does it go for just people, but also places. And this coming year, of course, a big celebration of Friendship Park, someplace that's been very special to so many of us. And I always think about the two people that were so instrumental in the binational masses and Posadas y Fronteras. And that was my dear friend that passed away about 10 years ago, Roberto Martinez, who was the co-founder of the Posadas. And Friar Ed, they started doing the Posadas and the binational masses. So it's important to remember who these people are and to continue, developing these programs, whether it's when I've been able to open the door of hope for people to hug, or Jim Brown's vision of this international park. Let's move forward on these ideas. Let's move forward, but not forget where they came from, or what came before us, what came before me, and so on and so on and so forth. It is so important. So there's going to be a lot of exciting activities. We're working on some right now. Recently we had a friend of ours from Tijuana who lives in Berlin. He's an artist and he wants to do things. We're working on concerts like we've done in the past. So let's continue in this time of COVID, not only to, we know we're in a really challenging time, but we know that we will dance again, that we will sing again. And it's so important that we get out there and we vote. We vote. And those are the students that are in your program that can't vote, but they know people that can vote. Get them to vote. Because this will be the most important election ever in our lifetimes. And a lot of these programs that we've been talking about hinge on what happens November 3rd. It could go one way or the other. One way it'll shut down everything, and the other one it'll let it flourish and continue with these programs. But it's really up to us. We ourselves can be the change we want to see in the world.
And you know what, Enrique, undocumented students and undocumented individuals cannot vote. But just like you said, they may know somebody. So just by sharing your views or letting them know how, just policies affect you to somebody, that might change their perspective on how they vote. Story sharing is very impactful. And another thing, individuals who are undocumented are always saying, I don't feel like I really have a voice because I can't vote. One way that they can have a voice is by submitting the census. So the census is a huge thing that we're trying to push through right now. And there's fears, is my immigration status going to be shared? And it doesn't, it's not. And so I think I went through a training. This is not information that I know, it's something that I learned, but they put it into perspective. So they basically said, if you have a family of 4 and you put that, for each family member, you just brought in for $1,000 into the community. So to put, for a family of 4, that's $4,000 that you brought into your community for schools, for resources. So if undocumented individuals feel that way, the census is another way for you to make your voice heard and to make changes in your community. You know, a lot of times, and you'll see a lot of our institutions or schools are, you know, the low income schools, you know, you don't have the resources. The kids are not getting those iPads that other kids are getting in those high income communities, right? And so this is one of the reasons why, because the money is not being brought in. Yes. You know, because we don't do the census. So this is a great way for the undocumented community to kind of bring in that resource, bring in that money, make their voice heard through the census. And it's, yeah, right now. So if you haven't done it, do it now.
Exactly. And as we're getting to the end here, is there a message that you would like to give to the students that are in your program, or to future students that are thinking about getting into the field of medicine and that are undocumented? Is there some sort of a message, encouraging words you would like to share with them?
Yes, they are needed. They are so needed in the health profession, even now, but I think even more in the near future, we're going to have a shortage of physicians. We're going to have a shortage of physicians, of folks that come from underrepresented communities. We're going to have a shortage of physicians and medical or health professionals who lack that cultural awareness, that lack the language, the knowing more than one, or, you know, knowing various languages. We're going to have a lack, or, you know, a gap. So undocumented students have all of that. You know, they have the cultural awareness. They're bilingual, sometimes trilingual, sometimes more. They have, you know, gone through so many obstacles, and through those obstacles, they've learned so many skills. All of those skills are vital in the health community or in the health professions. And so they're needed. It's necessary for them to keep pushing forward and to keep connecting and looking for those resources, because you are vital to our country.
Well, we're going to make sure that if you could share the links and so forth with Sarah, so we could put them on the podcast and people would know where to look for those resources. And one final question that I ask people ever since I used to have a radio show 20 years ago, to Yadira Ortiz, what is love?
What is love? Well, I think the way I practice love, it's something you have to practice, right? Fighting passionately for what you believe in. Fighting very passionate for those that you care about, and fighting passionately for what you believe in, and for things to work. Yes. You know, for things to progress and move forward. So I think the way I show my love is through like advocacy, both for my family and for the community.
Well said. So it's an action, not just a word. Mm-hmm. And Yadira Ortiz practices that action every day. So thank you very much for the work that you're doing, for the great example that you set to all of us. On behalf of Sarah Vela, our producer, Enrique Morones, your host, and everybody here at Gente Unida and Magnificent Mujer, muchísimas gracias. And we want you to continue with your wonderful work, your wonderful family, because we know that with amor, sí se puede. And you can see this podcast on all the regular podcast channels, including magnificentmujer.org. Muchas gracias, Yadi. Saludos a tu familia. Y hay que votar el 3 de noviembre. Let's get out the vote November 3rd. Gracias y sí se puede.
Thank you, Enrique. Thank you, Sarah.
Gracias.